June the 6th, 1944. D-Day. The invasion of occupied France by Allied forces. The landing zone was set for the Normandy coast from Ouistreham in the east to Le Madeleine in the west. It would be the beginning of the end of the war in Europe, as 156,000 men and 50,000 vehicles landed on the Normandy coast with support from 5,000 ships and 11,000 aircraft.
I think we all realised that landing back in France was going to be the ultimate, one way or the other.
We could see these mines sticking up on poles. We could see the sign that said Achtung Minern, and we could see the machine gun fire.
It was the only way to go, wasn't it? I mean, really.
I left school and I went to work with my uncle, who was a builder.
I joined the railway as a junior clerk in 1936 at 13 shillings a week for a 48-hour week, and then in 1939 I volunteered to join the Territorial Army and form a company, which we called Stratford D Company, to bring the 1st Hemp Battalion, the Royal Warwickshire Regiment Infantry Battalion, up to war strength. And it was the mayor who asked us, Tom Waldron, the councillor, and after that date we were known as Waldron's Warriors.
Before the war, well, I was a schoolboy first of all at Broad Street School till I was 11, and then I passed exams and went to King Edward VI School, Stratford Shakespeare School as it's known, and there I went through the A stream and eventually passed my Oxford School certificate in various subjects.
My dad is a Stratford man. He was born in Long Marston and moved to Stratford-on-Avon in his early teens and worked and trained to be a carpenter, and met Don while he was working for Kirk and Kirk, the carpenters. They went off together to Leamington, and when war broke out, they were told to get to work very early every morning in Leamington. Dad and Don decided they'd had enough of that and that they were going to sign up to work to go in the Marines. They originally started with the Navy, but the Navy was full up, so they went to sign up for the Marines, and off they went together. And that's how they met. They were good friends and trained together with the Marines, and actually didn't split up until their training was completed.
Oh, well, I left school in the July of 1943, aged just 17, and volunteered for the Women's Air Force. And I was duly called in. In the January, I received my papers and told to proceed to RAF Wilmslow in Cheshire.
And sign up for the Navy. So we went for the Navy. They said no chance. We're full up. Everybody wants to join the Navy. But we said, they said, we're taking Marines, which is the next best thing. So I talked it over with Joe and I said, well, per mare per tarum, by sea, by land. So we decided we'd join the Marines.
I lived in Shottery Road, and we signed up at what was the Hippodrome in Wood Street, and we were enlisted by Dr. Murray, English doctor, Stratford doctor, and all he asked us was, could we see? He weighed us and measured our height, and then we went to the counter where there was a platoon sergeant major of the Warwicks from the regimental headquarters, and we signed on. All he asked me was, what religious persuasion are you? And I said I couldn't understand what he was talking about. And he said, Church of England, and I said, yes, that'll do.
But I was only 15 and a half, but I put my age on to 16 and a half. Joe was all right because he was 17.
So I actually applied to the Merchant Navy to become a radio officer, but was failed on eyesight, and then volunteered for the Royal Navy, which of course I was still too young to actually go into, but eventually I was called up in and joined the Royal Navy in April, on Shakespeare's birthday actually, April 23rd, 1943.
We went to the same place, Deal, and that's where we joined up. We got kitted out there, and we swore allegiance to King George VI, and we went to Whitley Bay in Northumberland.
We worked a lot. We knew that we would be one of the first troops to land, and we had to work on it, and therefore it meant doing a lot of jumping in boats and out of boats, up in Scotland, up in Yorkshire.
Did anybody see us? We was in khaki. We wore exactly the same unit as the army did, only we got the different badges, etc. That was all.
And down in Dorset, and we did that for about two years, and so we were really very experienced about landing by the time came.
In the Navy, originally 10 weeks at HMS Collingwood, which was in Fareham, where we did initial training, and I obviously did fairly well, but I was called up before the captain and commanders of Collingwood with the opportunity to take a course to become an officer, and I passed that, and was then had the opportunity of either going to combined operations or submarines. Being somewhat claustrophobic, I obviously opted for combined ops, and I was then sent to a training camp in Western Scotland at Loch Ilort, where I did 6 weeks intensive training, very intensive training, to become an officer, and eventually passed that, and became, because of my age, I became a midshipman.
Route marches, the usual thing. Bren gun, how we'd never seen a Bren gun before. I don't think anybody had. And a strip Lewis, which was a Lewis gun, which stripped right down to make it lighter.
Well, it was great. I had to see
in a little boat, a landing craft, and go out and then get in the little boat and come back in, and when you got near the shore you jumped out and landed. That was the practice. Probably up to here, probably up to here.
They trained in two places. The first place was at Deal in Kent, and that's where they did their, what I would call their boots and braces training, where they got up early and learnt their drill. And they did the training that taught them right from wrong, getting up early and discipline. For their commando type training, they went up to Scotland, and that's when they were at sea a lot. That's when they really learnt their sea manoeuvres and how to negotiate ships and boats and whatever, and how to manage on the sea. And that's when they learnt that the whole part of being young commandos, as it were. They weren't actually commandos, but that's how they trained up in Scotland. And whilst they were up in Scotland, it became clear that they were specifically being trained for something quite special, quite important. And that became more apparent, I think, as their training came to an end, because they were told that they were going to have to sail down the east coast to go to Portsmouth, where they were the whole of the Marine regiment, every part of the Marines and the Navy were assembling around that part of the coast for this big event, which they knew nothing about.
Following my training at Loch Islet, we had further officer training in the area around Scotland, in Troon, where I was eventually appointed First Lieutenant on a landing craft, tank landing craft, LCT 2262, and we did weeks of training around the Scottish Islands, practicing beaching, practicing flotilla work, possibly practicing handling of landing craft. And were eventually sent just after Christmas 43 to Harland and Wolff's in Belfast, where we were converted into a landing craft tank armoured, which we knew little what that was the intention was, and but it was eventually decided it was for mounting tanks for the initial assault on what would become D-Day eventually.
One of the places they'd taken over was the Winter Gardens, and where we had all the Morse keys and tables laid out was in what had been the boating lake in the bottom of the Winter Gardens. So we went there and learnt the Morse code, and also, more to the point, how to transmit it. I'm left-handed, and of course all the Morse keys were on the right-hand side, so I was a bit slow in getting mobile in that direction. Anyhow, after 3 months, we were tested, and if we passed, we were then posted to Compton Bassett in Wiltshire, where we did the final 3 months of our wireless training.
Slapton Sands. Now, you've probably seen that on television about the Americans and all that. And Slapton Sands was a stretch of beach as you would wish to see, like Blackpool. And we were under canvas at the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth, and we had to land on this end, and we heard all the gunfire and shelling and all that. We thought it was part of the manoeuvres, you know, and apparently, when the secret was out, I just forget how many years it was, they were Americans and they were shot up by the E-boats of the Germans.
Scotland mostly. Scotland and Wales. Hackney Caddy in Scotland. That's a proper training
base commando at Macadie, and places in Wales. One or two places I couldn't pronounce the names. Even then I can't now.
And then we were told our objective was going to be Bayeux in Normandy, and we knew what to do because we'd done it so many times.
I always remember in Kent, I would go down a country lane and all the woods were full of soldiers waiting to go. And as I say, I was stationed down at Dover, and well, actually I was classed as a driver, so that's why I was there, and driving at this pool of vehicles, and yeah, but I say we had a lot of luck. I always remember one night there was always a aeroplane on the front at Dover, and this one particular night we took 3 ambulances back to the billets, and well, those weren't billets, empty houses we were living in, and the first one they're all arson ambulances, and the spare wheel stuck out on the left-hand side of the cabinet, the garage door going out, and luckily for us, we always think that he hadn't done that, we'd have got killed because there's a bomb landed on the seafront just where we thought we would be, where it's destroyed this aircraft that was always there, you know, so.
The forests down there, and if they ever blew up, they'd have blew England up. Of course, the forest was well, the shells and bombs in the woods. Yeah.
But I always remember, like, before D-Day, as I said, I'd seen these troops all in the woods hiding, and one night, Dover Harbour was hardly very small in those days, and I always remember waking up one morning and going passing the ambulance and seeing all these little tubs tied together, all covered in netting with cork on to make them, because they was landing craft.
I simply can't remember. We must have known we were going over, because this is the whole object of we were being trained to go over. So we knew we were going over, but I can't remember too much about that. We were in camp at Newhaven, and we weren't allowed out. But apart from that, I don't remember.
Oh, we didn't know nothing about it, no.
Nothing really. You just got there surprised when you got there. You didn't know, it was all kept secret. You didn't know a thing. Until you landed, you didn't know where you were.
About, be precise, 8 days, I would say. We were stationed in Bournemouth. We were told, pack up, oh no, we're moving off. And my captain said, well, we're not going to, with the regiment, we're going to Southampton.
And my father was in charge of the landing craft that would go to Normandy and back. Now, he had to sail out of Dartmouth, and he was completely surrounded not only by landing craft but every kind of little sailing vessel that was available to take these troops to go to France, to Normandy. And they knew there were 5 beaches to go to, and he knew that he was headed for Sword Beach.
And then we went in this camp and barbed wire, American sentry on duty, and as we drove in, they closed the gate behind me and said, that's it. And I said, well, I have a date with a nurse in Bournemouth tonight. You ain't going to go there, sir, because you're locked in. We stayed in that encampment preparing the vehicles, making them waterproof.
And we were due to be on D-Day. And just before D-Day, they put us back a few days. Whether the fact that they couldn't take us over there or not, I don't know, because it was a very rough sea. And I know we got on the boats, I think at New Haven, and that we had to go back onto land again because it was too rough.
We sailed originally on the 4th of June to land on the 5th of June, still not knowing where, but because of the state of the sea, which a force 6 gale or up to a force 8 was blowing, we were actually recalled. And then eventually the D-Day landings were arranged, and we set off again at 11 o'clock on the 5th to land on the D-Day beaches on the 6th of June.
And we got onto this big ship, and on it we about 2,000 infantry, Devons, if I get this right, Devons, the Hampshires.
We only knew exactly where we were landing when we were some miles out at sea, when operational orders were opened.
On a bright June morning in 1944, I was awakened by a steady roar of aircraft overhead. I dashed outside and was amazed to see an enormous number of aircraft flying very low over my house in Shrewley, mid-Warwickshire. These were Dakota troop carriers, and each aircraft had conspicuous black and white bar markings on the underside of the wings. They were flying extremely low in close formation, and the constant stream lasted for hours. They were flying south, and there must have been over 1,000. It was a safe assumption that the Allied forces were invading German-held Europe. I was only 17 at the time, but keenly interested in aircraft as a member of the Warwick School Air Training Corps. I learned later that 11,000 aircraft operated on D-Day, so my Dakotas must have been a large proportion of this.
June the 6th, 1944. My first year at Bexhill County Grammar School was coming to an end. And every day we travelled in the train from West Ham to Bexhill Central Station. And we went through the seaside places, Pevensey Bay Halt, Norman's Bay, Coodon Beach. And between Norman's Bay and Coodon Beach, the railway actually ran on the shingle. It was just a little higher than the beach. And so we always, in that stretch, had a view out to sea into the Channel, English Channel. And on this particular day, in our carriage, we sort of leapt up to look out of the window, because there on the horizon were battleships, end to end, on the horizon without a gap. And we were gasping and couldn't believe it. And we all thought and exclaimed, well, something's happening. The invasion must have started.
Well, as we moved into the beaches, we were off the Normandy coast in the early hours of the 6th of June, milling outside, waiting for the small LCAs to offload from merchant ships which carried the LCAs, and we were designated to go in with them to cover the beaches as they landed, and then we ourselves would land and decamp the tanks that we'd got on board.
And my specific job was to help to direct the fire of the regiment from the sea as it was sailing into the beach, and I'd be with the assault infantry directing fire of our regiment to make sure that the shells didn't fall short on us.
And it was still very, very rough. The LCAs were circling round, ready to go. And then I think, if my memory serves me right, around about 2 hours before the actual landings took place, the battleships, cruisers, destroyers opened up on the beaches, and the cacophony of sound was quite incredible. Pre to this, the planes had gone in the early hours to secure the perimeters of the beaches. The British paratroopers at Pegasus Bridge area, and the Americans at Samer Église.
And the great big guns of the Royal Navy were then opening fire. Huge guns, you know. And we've got to get in these little boats, so I climbed down the rope on the side of the boat with my pack of radio on my back. I was just, as I say, don't forget, not quite 21. And as we got to the bottom of the rope, there's this little landing craft carrying 30 infantry going up and down. And as it was going up, then I let go of the rope, so I jumped in, because as it was going down, you had a six foot gap, if you know what I mean. So then it go up again. So I knew exactly when to let go, and I dropped in.
I don't know. A lot of dead bits and pieces of people floating about. A few dead bodies coming up.
But as we passed the, it's now in Thames, isn't it? The Belfast, HMS Belfast cruiser, they let fly with the. I told my father about it afterwards. You know, not many people were outside of a broadside, and normally you're inside the ship. It was tremendous noise, and it whistled over the head.
Everybody was frightened, scared, not cowardice, but knowing that they can see you and you can't see them. It makes a difference.
I was glad I was seasick, because although I was seasick going in, it took my mind off what was awaiting. I was very lucky, because a lot of boats were turning over, and you know, chaps were being mowed down, and I had to run through the minefield, and I thought, well, I'll just keep running. And
when you're going towards the beach, eventually everybody out, you know, and you fan out and you go. But it's a funny feeling, knowing whether you're going to get killed or not, you know, and all those things flash through your mind. But when your legs feel like lead, and you can't run, but when everybody's out, then you come to life.
We landed with the LCAs. We hit an underwater obstacle, one of these tetrons, and ripped part of the underside of the landing craft. We hit the beach fairly high up and offloaded our tanks, 3 of which were knocked out immediately by an 88mm gun. One that had not been pre-spotted, but it was Beachmasters radioed back to the major ships, who put that very quickly out of action.
Went through the minefield, and I was still giving orders on my little radio, but I was obviously, it didn't occur to me at the time, a ripe target a chap with a radio giving messages. Obviously he's sending messages directing fire, which I was doing. And the next thing I realised that I felt nasty, as if someone had hit me with a sledgehammer in the leg, and I looked down, there was a big hole in my trousers leg, and I said to my colleague, I think I've been hit. So he said, well, lie down, let's have a look. And it turned out that I had been hit in the lower part of the leg. So he said, well, I'll take the radio off your back, I've got to keep going with the infantry, and when you'll get picked up, I have no idea. So I just sat in this little hole I've made for myself, and this is when this Royal Marine commander came up to me and said, can I take your Stain gun which you've got? And I said, by all means.
Well, it was to get ashore as quick as possible and get in and get settled in and dug in, get off the beach.
We landed on Gold Beach, and we were opposite the little church, and our orders was to go behind the little church, and our objective was Port End Besson.
A chap from the Devons walked past me, or ran past me, and I said, are you all right? And I said, put my thumb up, keep going, and suddenly he fell down, and he'd been shot. He fell down on top of me, and I could see that he was gone because he'd been shot right through the head. So as I pushed him aside, to get him off me, I suddenly thought, this is a sniper's fire. He'd been shot by a sniper. So as I pushed him off, I then decided I was going to lay still and not move. So I laid there and not moved. I thought, I'm next. And apparently I was, because when I got to hospital the next day, the nurse, when she looked at my trousers at the back, on this side, there was a bullet hole. So he had obviously fired at me afterwards, and as I didn't move, he probably thought I was dead.
We had to fight our way along, and there was rockets going over and shells from the battleships, and some were falling a bit short as well.
My father at that time was just 19 years old. Now, I can only imagine what that could have been like for a 19-year-old man, but boy. But he said he just went and did his duty. He did as he was told. He was commanded to take this landing craft to the Sword Beach, and that's what he did. And they all did that. And he said the first landing, he said, was okay, because everybody got off the boats and they just swam onto the beach. But the Germans were sort of ready. He said, but coming back and going back again, he said the sea was very, very rough, and it was full of bodies, and it wasn't a grey or green sea, that it was red. There was a lot of people lost already as they went onto the beach.
And we had a rendezvous with the Americans. South of the Port End Besson, and we waited there, and they didn't come. We had on the wireless that they had a bad time, and they did. They terrible. How they got shot up, and they were a day late, and we surrounded Port End Besson, and the Americans, the Germans, gave themselves up. They didn't want They didn't want to fight any more than what we did. They were fighting for their country the same as we were. But they gave in, not because they were cowards, because they saved lives.
I wandered up into sometime after, wandered up into the town of La Riviere, and it was quite a sight. It had been battered fairly badly. A lot of dead lay about, British and Germans, of course, plentiful Germans. And a very poignant moment, probably the most poignant moment I noticed in the whole of this. You have little or no time to take any notice of what's going on, but nuns at that time of day, only a short period after then, nuns had been around, crossed arms over soldiers and placed a rose in between. Rather poignant.
And when we got to Normandy, they packed us round the warspite because they had heard that the German submarines were going to operate in the area. So we were packed around the warspite to protect it against the torpedoes. And the warspite was acting as, because it was only a few days inland, they were acting as artillery with their 16-inch guns. So, and all I remember about that is that we were packed like sardines, one on top of the other, and the gangways are so narrow that if one person got out, you couldn't get past him. You had to kind of back away and make your way round.
You didn't get any meals. You got like oxo cubes. You got your water, that was it.
And I think we had to wait for the transport to come. And then from this kind of point where we assembled, we were then sent to contest, and that was our first battle.
Between 2,500 and 5,000 Allied soldiers were killed on D-Day. However, many more went missing. But these men had not died in vain. They had sacrificed themselves to free Europe of the oppressive Reich and secured freedom for the future generations, so we remember them still. However, we must also not forget that Germany itself took heavy losses in the Battle of Normandy.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Well, Remembrance Sunday. It's not about parades, marches and medals and all that. It's remembering all the people.
When I've been to the school, I always ended by saying, there's no glory in war.
I suppose I would sum it up, say I was very lucky.
When we travel abroad, I say, Dad, why don't you go abroad? And he always says, I've seen enough. And now, when I think back, you can see why. At 19 years of age, he'd seen enough to last any man a lifetime. And I'm just really proud of him.
There was comrades killed in every battle. But it didn't affect me. I think back and I think, well, why didn't I feel sorry or anything like that? I can't remember feeling upset. Even The pal who was at school, I can't remember feeling upset, but I do now.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrows, we gave ours today.